Alright, welcome back to another video. So we're going to go into the API and we're going to go ahead and create an endpoint to fetch an individual guild based off of the guild ID. So we're going to go over to routes guilds index.ts. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so it's easier for you to see. And we're going to go ahead and set up a router.get, and then we're going to register a ID endpoint. Okay, so this endpoint is basically just going to be for the user to fetch the individual guild's details. So let's go ahead and pass in our middleware, so it is authenticated, and then we're going to create a function for the controller. Okay, so let's go over to controllers, guilds index.ts, and right underneath here, we'll export an asynchronous function, and I'll call this get guild controller. And it's going to take in the same parameters, request and response. And notice how that we have get guilds controller with an S, and we have get guild controller. These are two completely different things, okay? Get guilds is giving us all of the guilds for the menu page, and then get guild, right, with no S, is giving us the individual guild. So when the user actually goes to the actual page for the guild on the dashboard, so for example, whoops, why my on my dashboard page, all right over here. So when the user actually visits like this actual page after clicking on a guild, it's going to go ahead and direct them here, and we need to fetch the data from the endpoint, and that's why we're building that. Okay, just wanted to mention that real quick. Okay, so we're going to need to fetch the guild by the ID. So what that means is we're going to need to first get the ID that is being passed as a parameter. So right over here. Okay, so this ID is the name of our guild ID. So we're going to go ahead and grab that from rec.params. And then we'll go ahead and just simply create a service function to actually call the Discord API. And we're going to call that service function from get guild controller. So let's go inside services, guilds index.ts. Let's create a function called, actually, I don't even think we need async because we're not going to use a wait. Let's call it get guild service. Okay, and it's going to take in the guild ID, which we're just calling as ID. So we're just going to return, and we're just going to return axios.get, and we're going to pass in the Discord API URL, which is declared up here, or it's imported from here. And then the endpoint is just /guilds, and then the guild ID. Okay, and we're going to have to pass in some headers, of course. And we're going to have to pass in the authorization header, which is really just going to be a bot token. Okay, so we're not using the bearer token, we're using the bot token. Okay, so let me just go ahead and create a variable and assign it the value of Discord or process.env Discord underscore bot underscore token, which is just our environment variable, assuming that we have up here when we were fetching all of the guilds. So we're really just doing the same thing, but just fetching a different endpoint. And then now I can just paste in the headers over here. So it's just going to be an object with an authorization property that maps to bot, and then it interpolates the token variable using a template string. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Hopefully not too confusing. We're just fetching the /guilds endpoint with the guild ID as a route parameter. And that guild ID is going to be passed in from the controller, which we're getting that route parameter, which is the guild ID, from the path. So let's go ahead and create a try catch. Okay, and if there is an error, we'll just send back a 400. And what we'll do is we'll fetch the data right now, so we'll call get guild service, pass in the ID, and that's just going to return an access response, which we could destructure the data property from it. And I'm just gonna rename this as guild, and then we'll just call res.send guild. Okay, now keep in mind that this endpoint over here is actually going to return an actual fully populated guild object. For the get get mutual guild service, right? We were actually calling the /users@me/guilds endpoint, which actually returns only a partial guild object. So a lot of the data that we're going to be using, at least right now, is going to overlap, and we're not really going to be referencing anything else. So just for now, I'll temporarily type annotate the return value from the endpoint as partial guild. But I do want to show you the differences between these endpoints real quick. So let's go ahead and before we type annotate anything, let me go ahead and just copy this get guild controller, and we're gonna go ahead and pass in as a parameter. Otherwise, this endpoint is not going to have a handler. It's just going to actually call the is authenticated, and it's not going to do anything else. All right, so let's go into our browser. So let me go ahead and copy this ID. So this is for GitHub guys, if I remember correctly. Oops, we got rate limited. That's what happens when you click it too fast. Okay, so let's go. So port 3001/API/guilds/ID. Okay, so see right over here, it gives us a bunch of different fields. Whereas before, if we were to fetch just if we were just fetching like the /users@me/guilds endpoint, it only gives us a partial guild. So it wouldn't give us like a bunch of other pieces of information, like all the roles. It wouldn't give us it wouldn't give us, I think, the emojis. It wouldn't give us the region. It wouldn't give us the vanity URL. I don't know why the region is set to Brazil. That's kind of weird. Yeah, so that's pretty much just what this endpoint is going to be for, is just to fetch the individual guild. Now you're probably wondering, like, can't we just like, just set the data on the front end using like context, right? Well, you could, but the problem here is that if the user were to visit the guild directly by passing in like the URL in the address bar, that would be a problem, right? Because you wouldn't, because like you would only be able to set the context when you click on the guild from the menu page, because by then we actually have like all the guilds already fetched from the API. So we can actually just set the context, but if the user visits the URL directly, they wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, so that would be the main problem. So in terms of like the types, though, the only difference is that we actually don't have. Let me show you real quick. We actually don't have the owner permission and features. So you can see over here that we're missing those three properties from this guild endpoint. So for you all, I would highly encourage you to create a custom type. I think there might be an existing library where you can just download and it just has like all of the types. There should definitely be one. I'm not too sure what that library is, but you could definitely check out. You can definitely check like Discord API and see if they do maintain like their own custom types, or you can just type annotate it yourself. It's a lot of different properties, so have fun. But I'm just gonna reuse the partial guild because I don't really see myself using the owner permissions and features. And if we do, we'll just create a custom type later. Okay, but for now, I'm just gonna use the partial guild. Now, I would not recommend doing this because if you try to reference the other properties, you're going to run into issues. But like I said, we're only going to reference the guild name and the guild icon and maybe the guild ID, and that's really it. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do that for now. And if I refresh, you can see that it'll still return all of the data for us, but it's just not going to, like, for example, if I try to reference vanity URL code, preferred local, it's not going to work. Okay, TypeScript won't know that that's an actual property, so you'll have to type annotate yourself. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much it for this video. In the next video, we'll go over to the Next.js app, and we're going to actually fetch this data from the Next.js app, and then we're going to go ahead and populate the sidebar and the app bar with the actual correct guild details. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. Peace out.